All right, you gelatinous globs of multidimensional goo, Commander Zixlorp gurgled, her pseudopods quivering with what passed for excitement in her species. Today we're going to delve into the most terrifying, bewildering, and downright nonsensical subject in the known universe. No, not quantum mechanics that's child's play compared to this. We're talking about human warfare tactics. A chorus of gasps, clicks, and one particularly loud belch, excuse you, blorb from the methane quadrant echoed through the lecture hall of the Galactic Academy of Military Sciences. But, Commander, a timid voice squeaked from the back, belonging to a small, furry creature that looked like a cross between a tribble and a hedgehog. I thought we were supposed to study advanced civilizations. Humans are barely out of their Stone Age. Zixlorp's central eye stalk swiveled to fix the student with a gaze that could melt durasteel. Ah, Fluffles, always the optimist. Tell me, how many times have your people successfully invaded Earth? Fluffles shrunk back, his spines drooping. 17 attempts, 0 successes, Commander. Exactly, Zixlorp exclaimed, slapping a tentacle against her gelatinous body with a wet splat. And, do you know why? Because humans are batshit crazy, that's why. They're the only species in the galaxy that treats warfare like a game of Calvin ball, making up the rules as they go along. The class buzzed with nervous energy. A tall, willowy being composed entirely of crystalline structures raised what appeared to be a hand. Commander, I've analyzed all known combat data from Earth. Their strategies seem inefficient at best, suicidal at worst. How could they possibly be effective? Zixlorp's body rippled with what might have been laughter or indigestion. It was hard to tell with her species. Ah, Prism. Ever the logical one. That's precisely why we're here today. Humans don't just think outside the box, they set the box on fire, launch it into space, and then ride it back down to Earth like some deranged rodeo cowboy. She gestured to the holographic display at the front of the room. Let's start with a classic example. The Battle of Agincourt, Earth year 1415. Who can tell me the primary weapons used by the English in this battle? A bulbous creature with eyes on stalks waved its appendages frantically. Ooh, I know this one. They used pointy sticks. Correct, Globulus Zixlorp beamed, or at least her bioluminescent patches glowed a bit brighter. Now, who can tell me what any sane, advanced civilization would use against an army wielding pointy sticks? The class fell silent, each student lost in thought. Finally, a robotic entity in the front row buzzed to life. Logical analysis suggests energy weapons, Commander. Perhaps disintegration rays or plasma cannons. Excellent, X-22 Zixlorp exclaimed. Now, can anyone guess what the French, who outnumbered the English by at least 4-1, actually used? More silence. Zixlorp's tentacles wriggled with barely contained glee. They used bigger pointy sticks. And horses. They charged directly at the English, through mud, straight into a hail of arrows, because apparently that seemed like a good idea at the time. The entire class stared in disbelief. Fluffles raised a tiny paw. But that's insane. Why would they do that? Because they're human, Fluffles Zixlorp practically shouted. Their entire history is one long string of hold my beer moments. And here's the kicker the English won. A bunch of tired, sick men with pointy sticks defeated a larger, better-equipped army because they had the audacity to dig some holes and stand their ground. The class erupted into a cacophony of bewildered exclamations. Prism's crystalline structure vibrated with confusion. This defies all logical analysis, Commander. How can we possibly predict or counter such madness? Zixlorp supplied helpfully. That's the point, my dear students. You can't. Human warfare is like trying to play chess with an opponent who occasionally eats the pieces, sets fire to the board, and then declares victory because they've collected the most bottle caps. She waved a tentacle, and the holographic display shifted to show a map of Russia. Let's move on to another example of human insanity. Who can tell me about Earth's World War II? X-22's circuits whirred as it processed the information. A global conflict involving multiple human factions, lasting from Earth years 1939 to 1945. Notable for its scale and the development of atomic weapons. Good, Zixlorp nodded, her eye stalks bobbing. Now, let's focus on one particular aspect, the German invasion of Russia, Operation Barbarossa. Can anyone guess what the Germans' fatal flaw was? Globulus's eye stalk swiveled excitedly. Ooh, was it not bringing enough sunscreen? I hear Earth's sun can be quite harsh." The class erupted in laughter, a discordant symphony of clicks, buzzes, and squelches. Zixlorp's gelatinous body quivered with mirth. Close, globulous, but not quite. The Germans made a classic blunder. They invaded Russia in winter. Prism's crystalline structure flickered in confusion. "But, Commander, surely advanced military strategists would account for climatic conditions in their planning." "Oh, you sweet summer child," Zixlorp chuckled, her pseudopods waving dismissively. "You're applying logic to human behavior again. The Germans, in all their supposed efficiency, forgot one crucial detail: Russia is cold. Very, very cold. So cold, their vehicles froze, their soldiers froze, and their dreams of conquest froze faster than a Plutonian skinny dipper." The class was a mixture of horrified gasps and nervous laughter. Fluffles, his spines now fully erect in shock, squeaked, but how did the Russians survive? Zixlorp's central eye gleamed with mischief. "Ah, now we come to the true insanity of human warfare. The Russians, you see, had a secret weapon. Can anyone guess what it was?" The students looked at each other in bewilderment. Finally, X-22 buzzed hesitantly, a new form of energy shield. "Perhaps a weather control device." "Nope," Zixlorp exclaimed, clearly enjoying the suspense. Their secret weapon was pure, unadulterated stubbornness. They simply refused to lose. They burned their own cities, scorched their own earth, and basically said, "If we can't have it, nobody can." The class fell into stunned silence. Prism's voice, when it finally came, was barely a whisper. "They destroyed their own resources. How is that a viable strategy?" Zixlorp's body rippled with what might have been a shrug. "Welcome to the wonderful world of human tactics, where cutting off your nose to spite your face is not just an idiom, but a legitimate military strategy. The Russians figured if they couldn't beat the Germans with conventional means, they'd just make their country so inhospitable that the invaders would wish they'd stayed home." Globulus raised an eye stalk tentatively. "But, Commander, surely there must be some method to their madness. Some underlying logic we're missing." "Ah." Globulus Zixlorp sighed, her pseudopods drooping dramatically. "You're still thinking like a rational being. The key to understanding human warfare is to abandon all logic and embrace the chaos. Humans don't win because they have better technology or superior numbers. They win because they're willing to do things so monumentally stupid that no sane species would ever see it coming." She waved a tentacle, and the holographic display changed again, this time showing a series of wooden ships. Let's take another example: the Battle of Trafalgar. The year is 1805, and the British naval fleet is facing a combined French and Spanish armada. The logical move would be to form a line and engage in a broadside battle, right? The class nodded in unison, a bizarre sight given the variety of appendages and structures involved. "Well," Zixlorp continued, her voice dripping with sarcasm, "Admiral Nelson, in his infinite wisdom, decided that was too boring. Instead, he split his fleet into 2 columns and drove them straight at the enemy line. It was the equivalent of bringing a knife to a gunfight, and then throwing the knife aside to headbutt your opponent." Fluffles, his fur now standing on end, squeaked in disbelief. But that's suicide. They'd be torn apart before they could even engage." "Exactly," Zixlorp exclaimed, her pseudopods waving excitedly. "By all rights, it should have been a disaster. But here's the kicker: it worked. The British smashed through the enemy line, turning the battle into a chaotic melee where their superior gunnery and seamanship could shine. It was so audacious, so utterly bonkers, that the French and Spanish didn't know how to respond. X-22's circuits whirred as it processed this information. Query: is the key to human tactical success simply to perform actions so illogical that they cannot be predicted or countered? Zixlorp's central eye swiveled to fix the robotic student with a gaze that could only be described as proud. "By Zorp's tentacles, I think it's got it. Humans have turned unpredictability into an art form. They don't just think outside the box, they deny the very existence of the box, then build a fort out of the splinters." She moved to the center of the room, her gelatinous body undulating with excitement. "But wait, it gets better. Let's talk about one of the most infamous human military blunders that somehow turned into a victory: the charge of the Light Brigade." The class leaned forward, a mixture of anticipation and dread rippling through the assorted alien forms. Picture this, Zixlorp began, her voice taking on a dramatic tone. It's 1854, during something humans call the Crimean War. A group of light cavalry is given an order to capture some guns. Simple enough, right? Prism's crystalline structure vibrated in agreement. Indeed, Commander. A straightforward tactical objective. Oh, you poor, naive collection of mineral deposits, Zixlorp chuckled. In any sane military, yes. But this is human warfare we're talking about. Due to a series of miscommunications, because apparently clear communication is too mainstream for humans, the light cavalry ended up charging directly into a valley surrounded on three sides by enemy artillery. The class erupted into a cacophony of disbelief. Globulus's eye stalks were tied in knots, literally. But that's certain death. Surely they retreated. Zixlorp's body quivered with what might have been laughter. Retreat. Oh, my dear Globulus, you underestimate the human capacity for glorious idiocy. Not only did they not retreat, but they charged faster. Over 600 lightly armed cavalry against a prepared artillery position. It was like watching a swarm of angry flies attack a plasma cannon. Fluffles, his spines now drooping in confusion, squeaked, "What happened to them, Commander?" "What do you think happened?" Zixlorp retorted. "They were decimated. Cut down by artillery fire, forced to retreat with heavy casualties. By all accounts, it was a complete disaster." The class nodded solemnly, finally hearing something that made sense in the context of warfare. And yet Zixlorp continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. This utter failure, this complete military catastrophe, became, wait for it, a celebrated event in human military history. The silence that followed was so complete you could have heard a Venusian flea sneeze. "You're joking," Prism finally managed, its crystalline structure vibrating with disbelief. "Oh, I wish I was," Zixlorp sighed. But no, humans actually celebrated this disaster. They wrote poems about it, painted pictures, even made music. They turned a tactical blunder into a shining example of bravery and duty. X-22's processors whirred frantically. Illogical. Celebrating failure does not compute. Purpose unclear. And therein lies the true genius or madness of human warfare, Zixlorp declared. They don't just learn from their mistakes, they glorify them. They take their failures and turn them into legends, inspiring future generations to even greater acts of insanity. She waved her tentacles, and the holographic display changed once more, this time showing a series of different human conflicts throughout history. This, my dear students, is why humans are so dangerous. It's not just that they're unpredictable, it's that they can turn their very unpredictability into a strength. Fluffles raised a timid paw. But Commander, if their tactics are so chaotic, how do they maintain any kind of military discipline? Zixlorp's central eye swiveled to fix the fuzzy student with a gaze that could only be described as manic. Ah, now we come to the true paradox of human warfare. You see, humans have this bizarre ability to be simultaneously rigid and flexible, disciplined and chaotic. They can follow orders with fanatical devotion one moment, then completely disregard the chain of command the next if they think they have a better idea. The class buzzed with confusion. Prism's crystalline structure flickered rapidly as it tried to process this information. But that's completely contradictory. How can a military function like that? Function, Zixlorp laughed, her gelatinous body rippling. Oh, my dear Prism, who said anything about functioning? Human militaries don't function, they careen wildly from one crisis to the next, leaving a trail of baffled enemies in their wake. She moved to the center of the room, her pseudopods waving dramatically. Let me give you an example. During their Second World War, the humans had these things called paratrooper soldiers who would jump out of perfectly good aircraft to land behind enemy lines. Now, any sane species would consider this a precision operation, right? Carefully planned, meticulously executed. The class nodded in unison, a sea of tentacles, appendages, and other alien body parts bobbing in agreement. Well, Zixlorp continued, her voice dripping with sarcasm, during the invasion of a place called Normandy, an entire group of these paratroopers missed their drop zone. They were scattered all over the countryside, lost outnumbered, and out of contact with their command. Globulus's eye stalks drooped. Oh no, they must have surrendered immediately. Zixlorp's central eye gleamed with mischief. Surrender? Oh, you sweet summer child. No, these lost, scattered troops decided that the logical thing to do was to cause as much chaos as possible. They attacked random targets, blew up bridges, and generally ran amok behind enemy lines. And here's the kicker: it worked. They caused so much confusion that the enemy thought there were far more of them than there actually were. The class erupted into a cacophony of disbelief and confusion. X-22's circuits were smoking slightly as it tried to process this information. Query: you suggesting that human military success is based on accidental chaos? Accidental, intentional, it's all the same to humans, Zixlorp exclaimed. They have this saying, no plan survives contact with the enemy. Most species would see this as a flaw to be corrected. Humans, they embrace it. They plan for their plans to fail. She waved a tentacle, and the holographic display changed to show a complex flowchart. This, my dear students, is what a human battle plan looks like. Notice anything strange? The class leaned in, a chorus of confused murmurs rippling through the lecture hall. Prism's crystalline structure vibrated as it analyzed the diagram. It appears to have multiple branches and contingencies, Commander. Far more than standard tactical doctrine would suggest. Exactly, Zixlorp exclaimed, her pseudopods quivering with excitement. Humans don't just plan for success, they plan for failure. They have plans for their plans failing, and then plans for those plans failing. It's like they're playing a game of multi-dimensional chess, where half the pieces are on fire and the other half have suddenly decided to become pacifists. Fluffles raised a trembling paw. But Commander, how can they possibly keep track of so many variables? The cognitive load must be immense. Zixlorp's central eye swiveled to fix the fuzzy student with a gaze that could only be described as maniacal. Ah, Fluffles, that's where you're making a crucial mistake. You're assuming humans actually keep track of anything. The class fell into stunned silence. Even X-22's constant background hum of processing seemed to stutter. You see, Macy, Zixlorp continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Humans have this remarkable ability to simultaneously overplan and underplan. They'll spend months meticulously planning every detail of an operation, right down to how many pairs of socks each soldier should pack. And then, the moment the first shot is fired, they'll throw the entire plan out the window and start improvising. Globulus's eye stalks were so tangled it looked like it had tried to knit with them. But that's insane. How can they possibly coordinate their forces? Zixlorp's body rippled with what might have been laughter. Coordinate? Oh, my dear Globulus, you're still thinking like a rational being. Humans don't coordinate, they synchronize chaos. They have this concept called commander's intent, basically. They tell their troops the overall goal, and then let them figure out how to achieve it. It's like giving a group of sugar-high toddlers a vague description of a sandcastle and then letting them loose on a beach. The class buzzed with a mixture of horror and fascination. Prism's crystalline structure was flickering so rapidly it was in danger of inducing seizures in several species present. But wait, Zixlorp gurgled, her pseudopods waving for attention. It gets even better. Let's talk about one of the most baffling human military concepts, special forces. The holographic display shifted to show images of human soldiers in various terrains and situations. Now, most species have elite military units, Zixlorp explained. But humans? They've turned it into an art form. Their special forces aren't just trained to be the best fighters, they're trained to be the best at everything. X-22's processors whirred in confusion. Query: define everything, Commander. Oh. X-22. Zixlorp chuckled, her gelatinous body quivering. When humans say everything, they mean it. These special forces folks aren't just soldiers, they're diplomats, engineers, medics, linguists, and sometimes even amateur anthropologists. They drop these teams into the most volatile situations imaginable and expect them to not just survive, but to completely change the course of conflicts. Fluffles, his spines now fully erect in shock, squeaked, But how can any being be trained in so many disciplines? It's impossible. Impossible, Zixlorp scoffed. Fluffles, my dear, fluffy friend, you're applying logic to humans again. These special forces types don't just laugh in the face of impossible, they buy it a drink, tell it a bad joke, and then convince it to help them on their mission. The class erupted into nervous laughter, a discordant symphony of clicks, buzzes, and squelches. Let me give you an example, Zixlorp continued, her voice taking on a storytelling tone. During one of their conflicts, a small team of these special forces was dropped into a remote, mountainous region. Their mission? Oh, nothing much, just to overthrow an entrenched regime, build a local army from scratch, and completely reshape the geopolitical landscape of the region. And here's the kicker: they did it while riding horses. The silence that followed was so complete you could have heard a Venusian flea's heartbeat. Horse's prism finally managed, its crystalline structure vibrating with disbelief. The quadrupedal animals humans once used for transportation before developing motorized vehicles. The very same Zixlorp exclaimed. These elite soldiers, trained in the most advanced warfare techniques, armed with cutting-edge technology, decided that the best way to navigate this challenging terrain was to use a mode of transportation that was outdated centuries ago. And you know what? It worked. They combined ancient cavalry tactics with modern warfare, creating a hybrid strategy that their enemies couldn't even begin to comprehend. Globulus's eye stalks were spinning in confusion. But that's like using a stone axe in a plasma rifle fight. Exactly, Zixlorp gurgled with glee. And that, my dear students, is the true genius of human warfare. They don't just think outside the box, they take the box, turn it inside out, set it on fire, and then use the ashes to write a strongly worded letter to whoever invented boxes in the first place. She moved to the center of the room, her gelatinous body undulating with excitement. And this is why humans are so dangerous on the battlefield. It's not their technology, not their numbers, not even their physical capabilities. It's their sheer, unbridled capacity for creative insanity. X-22's circuits were now emitting a faint smell of burning silicon. Commander, this defies all logical analysis. How can we possibly develop countermeasures against such madness? Zixlorp supplied helpfully. That's the point, X-22. You can't. Trying to develop a logical counter to human tactics is like trying to use a calculator to solve a poem. It's not just that you're using the wrong tool, you're in a completely different conceptual universe. She waved her tentacles, and the holographic display changed once more, this time showing a series of human faces, each caught in various expressions of determination, fear, joy, and every emotion in between. This, my dear students, is our real problem, Zixlorp said, her voice suddenly serious. Humans don't just fight with their bodies or their weapons. They fight with their emotions, their beliefs, their sheer bloody-minded determination to prevail against all odds. They can be losing a war on every front, their cities in ruins, their armies in retreat, and they'll still convince themselves that victory is just around the corner. Fluffles raised a trembling paw. But surely they must have some sort of breaking point, some limit to their endurance. Zixlorp's central eye fixed the fuzzy student with a gaze that could only be described as pitying. Oh, Fluffles. Sweet, naive Fluffles. Let me tell you about a little human conflict called the Siege of Leningrad. The holographic display shifted to show images of a snow-covered city, its buildings in ruins, its people gaunt and hollow-eyed. For 872 days, Zixlorp began, her voice hushed. This city was surrounded by enemy forces. Food ran out. The winter was brutal. By all logic, by all reason, the city should have fallen. The people should have given up. The class leaned in, captivated despite their horror, but they didn't. Zixlorp continued. They ate wallpaper, paste, and leather boots. They burned books and furniture to stay warm. And through it all, they kept fighting. Not just surviving, mind you, but actively resisting. They ran factories to produce munitions, held concerts in bombed-out buildings, even maintained a seed bank for future crops. Prism's crystalline structure was vibrating so intensely it was in danger of shattering. But that's beyond endurance. It's insane, Zixlorp supplied. Irrational? Impossible? Welcome to the world of human warfare, where the impossible is just Tuesday and insanity is a tactical advantage. She moved back to the center of the room, her gelatinous body seeming to grow larger, more imposing. And this, my dear students, is why we study human tactics. Not because they're logical, not because they're efficient, but because they're so far beyond our comprehension that they loop right back around to being brilliant. X-22's voice, when it finally came, was barely a whisper. Query, how can we possibly hope to counter such unpredictability? Determination? Sheer bloody-minded stubbornness, Zixlorp chuckled. That, my dear X-22, is the trillion-credit question. And the answer is We can't. At least not in any way that makes sense to us. The class fell into a stunned silence, each student lost in their own thoughts, trying to process the sheer insanity of what they'd learned. But Zixlorp continued, her voice taking on an almost conspiratorial tone. There is one factor that might just give us an edge, one aspect of human psychology that we can potentially exploit. The class leaned in, a mixture of hope and dread rippling through the assembled alien forms. Human Zixlorp said, her central eye gleaming, have an Achilles heel. A weakness so profound, so deeply ingrained in their psyche, that it can undermine even their most brilliant strategies. Fluffles, his spines quivering with anticipation, squeaked, "What is it, Commander? What's their weakness?" Zixlorp's body rippled with what might have been a dramatic pause. "Their weakness, my dear students, is humor." The class erupted into confused murmurs. Prism's crystalline structure flickered rapidly. Humor? The human concept of amusement through incongruity or absurdity. The very same Zixlorp exclaimed. You see, humans have this bizarre ability to find amusement in almost anything, even in the direst of circumstances. And this can be both their greatest strength and their most profound weakness. She waved a tentacle, and the holographic display changed to show various human expressions of laughter and mirth. Humans use humor as a coping mechanism, Zixlorp explained. It helps them deal with stress, fear, even the horrors of war. But here's the thing, when humans start laughing, they can't always stop. Their logic centers shut down, their bodies are racked with spasms. They can even experience difficulty breathing. Globulus's eye stalks were tied in knots again. But how is this a weakness we can exploit, Commander? Zixlorp's central eye gleamed with mischief. Ah, Globulus, now you're thinking like a true military strategist. Imagine this: we're in the heat of battle. Human forces are advancing, their unpredictable tactics throwing our lines into disarray. But then we deploy our secret weapon. The class leaned in, captivated. We broadcast the galaxy's funniest joke, Zixlorp continued, her voice hushed with anticipation. A joke so hilarious, so perfectly tailored to the human sense of humor, that they can't help but laugh. And not just a chuckle, mind you, but full-blown, uncontrollable laughter. X-22's processors whirred as it processed this information. Query, but Commander, how would this incapacitate their forces? Laughter is not typically considered a debilitating condition. Ah, but that's where you're wrong, X-22 Zixlorp exclaimed. When humans laugh hard enough, they can literally fall over. They experience muscle weakness, loss of coordination, even temporary inability to speak. Imagine an entire human army rolling on the ground, clutching their sides, gasping for breath, all because we told them a really good joke. The class buzzed with a mixture of disbelief and excitement. Fluffles, his fur standing on end, squeaked, but Commander, how can we possibly create a joke that's funny? We barely understand human humor, as it is. Zixlorp's body rippled with what might have been a shrug. And therein lies our next great challenge, my dear students. We must study human humor with the same intensity we study their tactics. We must understand their puns, their wordplay, their slapstick and satire. We must become comedians. The silence that followed was so complete you could have heard a Plutonian ice crystal form. Comedian's prism finally managed, its crystalline structure vibrating with disbelief. Exactly, Zixlorp gurgled with glee. Our next great weapon in the war against human unpredictability will not be a bomb or a ray gun, it will be a joke so funny, so utterly hilarious, that it will bring the entire human war machine to its knees. She moved to the center of the room, her gelatinous body seeming to glow with excitement. And so, my dear students, your assignment for the next Galactic Standard Week is this: study human comedy. Watch their sitcoms, read their joke books, analyze their memes, and then create the funniest joke the universe has ever known. The class erupted into a cacophony of confused exclamations, nervous laughter, and what might have been a few quiet sobs of despair. As the students filed out of the lecture hall, still buzzing with a mixture of excitement and dread, Commander Zixlorp allowed herself a small ripple of satisfaction. Let the humans have their unpredictable tactics, their irrational bravery, their chaotic brilliance. The Galactic Alliance had a secret weapon brewing, and soon the humans would learn to fear the power of laughter. Little did Zixlorp know, somewhere on a small blue planet in an unremarkable spiral galaxy, A human general was giving a very similar lecture to her troops. "Listen up, soldiers," she barked, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "Intelligence reports that the aliens are trying to weaponize comedy. You know what that means." A young private raised his hand nervously. "That we're doomed, ma'am." The general's laughter echoed through the briefing room. "Doomed? Son, we've just won the war. After all, what's more unpredictable than a good laugh?" And so, as two vastly different species prepared for a battle of wits and giggles, the universe held its breath, and then burst into uncontrollable laughter.